Hi everyone, Comic Book Reviewer here. This time reviewing on Masters of the Universe, Icon of Evil, Trapjaw. Now as you know, Icon of Evil was meant to give introductions to the 2002 He-Man series of villains, like obviously Triclops, Beastman, Merman, as well as Trapjaw. And the best I can say about Trapjaw, he's basically like a more robotic X version of Skeletor, and the way I always would intend to do Trapjaw's origin is have him be the uncle of Skeletor, as well as the older brother of his mother. And yeah, the cover mainly has Trapjaw in his iconic suit, and the story is meant to take place to how he came to be. So let's get on. And it starts off with Skeletor saying, "You will follow me as you followed Caldor. We are the one and the same." And of course, we see Trapjaw before he was Trapjaw, known as Cronus, who says, "Your wrinkles don't stop at the bone, Skeletor. You're not the man I followed. You have become an irredeemable flawed. You're no longer fit to lead." And of course, we see how Skeletor takes offense to this, and even points out that, yeah, because of what happened with the whole magic wall, that the dark half of Eternia can't have their trade routes, food is scarce, constant war and all that. And we see how Cronus says, "I've had enough. If you think I will allow myself to be talked to in..." And we see Skeletor blast him, and of course, mainly has Beastman and Sandslash basically throw him out of Snake Mountain and let him fend for himself. And this is where Cronus ends up getting up and decides to prove himself and says, "You haven't seen the last of me, Skeletor." And the first thing we see him do is confront a whole bunch of bandits, takes them down single-handedly, and says, "Fools, do you know who I am?" And we see how, yeah, he takes them down single-handedly, and this is the starting point to his own army, saying, "This is my territory now. You and all your men take orders from me. Yes, yes, sir." And we see how they go up to an enemy camp, and see how, with the multiple guards, it's one of the main general tents. They mainly take out the general, and of course, we see how Cronus basically points out about the general being a tyrant, and if they follow him, he will treat them just unfairly. And of course, we see how every time he wins a battle, he gains more followers. And this is meant to mirror Skeletor from when he was Caldor, gaining other evil warriors. And we see how Cronus ends up kind of gathering more and more people join him, and over time wants to build the biggest army that he ever has to take on Skeletor. And over time, we've seen how he's built up such a large army. We see how Cronus realizes that, yeah, from one of his generals, that no one is left in the area to fight, and nobody wants to face his army. And this is where Cronus gets the most dumbest idea, that he wants to personally take on Skeletor in Snake Mountain, even though he should quit while he's ahead, and he's already proven his point. And this is the fatal flaw of Cronus, his desperate need to prove he's better than Skeletor. And we see how on Snake Mountain, we see how after torturing someone, we see how Triclops gives information to Skeletor that Cronus has gathered a large army, and says, Cronus has formed an army? Ha ha ha! Tell me, where are they headed?" It appears they are headed this way." And yeah, in Skeletor's anger, blasts Triclops, and this is where he personally takes on Cronus' army, and we see how it becomes a bloody bloodbath, and Cronus and his army are slowly getting decimated. We see how he tries to take on anyone that he can find, but of course, Skeletor ends up blasting his army, and this is where he wants to desperately take on Skeletor. And we see him saying, "Skeletor, I've waited a long time for this. You're the first person I've met so looked forward to death. The only death I'm looking forward to is yours. And we see how they mainly duke it out, and we see how Skeletor uses his powers to blast off Cronus' face, and he gets his Havoc Staff and blasts off his Almanac. So, of course, mirroring what happened to him with Randall, showing history will and can repeat itself. And Skeletor mainly blasting off his jaw, and of course, now that his army's decimated, he has no one really left to fight behind. And we see how he tries to put his hand on him, saying, "What's this? You now beg for mercy? You are so afraid of death, Cronus. You've proven that you can be an asset to me. I never would have prepared that you could ever amass such a large army. You have impressed me, and for that, you will be spared." And of course, we see how Tricorps points out that Cronus' army has been decimated, but has Tricorps basically trying to reconstruct him while he sorts out what survivors are left. And we see how later on, Evelyn basically berates Cronus for showing mercy in that, and even is disappointed for what he turned himself into. And we find out that he wasn't begging for mercy, he was trying to strangle him. And we see how he now takes the name Trapjaw, now becoming a shell of his former self. And this is the story. So I think this comic is kind of okay, but it is meant to show the fatal side of Trapjaw's origin. He had such a large army, he should have quit while he was ahead, but instead was so desperate to prove himself better than Skeletor, he ended up not only costing himself his life, but also damaging his own army to the point that he was no longer able to kind of be that person he once was, showing that he was meant to be a reflection of not only Caldor, but also Skeletor, showing in a way history will and can repeat itself. But it's definitely still an enjoyable issue, so it still deserves a thumbs up. Still good, and still alright. So, comic book reviewer here, signing out.